You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can make this possible. All right, folks, from 1865 to 1920, African Americans created more than 50 identifiable towns and settlements. 13 of them are still alive in Oklahoma. These all-black towns represent a unique chapter in American history, according to the Oklahoma Historical Society. No other place in the Deep South or the Far West had more African American men and women come together to create, occupy, and govern their own towns. Joining me right now to discuss this is Hannibal Johnson. He is the chair of the Education Committee for the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre Centennial Commission. And Hannibal, this is something that I think, we know about the movie Rosewood. I know that there are towns in Texas. Barrett Station is one of those towns. There are places in Virginia where this happened. And so, I mean, these were places that were built from the ground up that black folks started and controlled.
That's absolutely correct. One of the more interesting notions at the end of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century, was that if African Americans could simply prove their industriousness, their ability to be self-governing, then white racism would abate. And that sounds fanciful by 2020 standards, but that was a real philosophy promoted by the likes of Booker T. Washington and others. So part of the impetus for these towns was to be self-governing, to prove independence, to escape the hostility that folks faced in the Deep South, and to thereby help abate the kind of rigorous and vicious white racism that existed more generally. Also, Oklahoma was an important part of this development because the perception that Oklahoma was a place rife with economic opportunity because of the abundance of land. Oklahoma becomes a state in 1907. Prior to that, it was Indian Territory. And one of the unique features about the black presence in Oklahoma is the fact that the so-called 5 civilized tribes, the Cherokees, the Muskogee Creek, the Seminole, the Choctaw, and the Chickasaw, they were all slave-holding tribes. So on those famous marches to Oklahoma, those trails of tears, were a number of black migrants who were affiliated with those 5 tribes, many of them affiliated as enslaved persons. All the tribes sided with the Confederacy during the Civil War, and after the Civil War, executed treaties with the federal government that required that they free their enslaved Africans and incorporate them into the tribes, and all the tribes did that with the exception of the Chickasaws.
And when you think about this very unique history, some of these towns are still active and alive today. Do you still see the presence, though, of African Americans governing those places?
Yes, in some of the towns, the premier town in Oklahoma has been, and perhaps still is, Boley. So Boley was founded in 1903 and still exists as a much smaller version of its prior self. Boley at one point boasted 5,000 residents. Now it's about a tenth of that. And the supreme irony in Boley is that one of the larger employers in the community is the John Lilly Correctional Institute, a prison. And guess who is well represented in the context of that prison? Some of the very African Americans who ostensibly sought to escape the kind of restrictions on their liberty in the Deep South. That's part of the reason they migrated to Oklahoma in the first instance. But the black towns that exist, about a dozen or so today, are small communities struggling to survive, struggling to secure the kind of infrastructure that will sustain the town, and ultimately struggling with maintaining young folk who grow up in these towns. they want to wind up in the metropolitan areas of Oklahoma City and Tulsa, and really have little interest in staying in these towns. So the towns really struggle for survival. One of the things that the towns have been doing is working together to create a cultural tourism experience. In other words, to leverage their rich history such that people who want to engage around history, and there are people like that all around the United States, and actually see the remnants of these towns, can come to these communities and ideally contribute financially to the health, well-being, and sustainability of these communities while they're there.
Greg Carr, you got a question?
Yeah, and first of all, Brother Johnson, thank you for your work over the years. I mean, your book, Black Wall Street, the book you did on Greenwood, and I think it was Acres of Aspiration, where you write about these towns. I mean, just thank you. I don't know if you got a chance to see the HBO recent mini series Watchmen, which begins with Tulsa and kind of runs through the thread. Just out of curiosity, what do you think a show like that, putting Tulsa at the center of a kind of a futurist narrative, does for spreading the word about what happened in Tulsa?
Well, I think most people I've talked to found that the opening scene, that sort of 5-minute segment, that's kind of a reenactment, reimagination of the massacre, is quite compelling. So when I see something like that that is based in truth, based in fact, I hope that it encourages the viewers to actually seek out the actual history. I appreciate the artistic license that was taken by Watchmen. It brings in viewers, but I want those viewers to actually go back and look at the actual history and understand that history is not past, history is present. So there's a legacy in the Tulsa community today based on what happened back in 1921, almost 100 years ago.
Thank you.
But my brother...
Do you have a question there from Kelly or Juliana? A question, short question.
I have a question or comment. The issue is
No. I want pick one.
Okay.
Pick one. Question or comment.
The issue is economic envy. The fact is that when I looked at the governor of Oklahoma's report on what happened, one of the conclusions was that too many N-words, and it was not the Negro word, had too much money. So
right.
How do you begin to reconcile economic envy with the story that you're telling?
Go right ahead, sir.
And I think you can look at the sort of the economic dynamics in two ways. There was envy on the individual level because white supremacy prevailed. So poor white folks wondered what those N-words across the tracks were doing with fine cars, fine homes, jewelry, et cetera, et cetera. So that's on one level. On the other level, the Greenwood community, the black community, the Black Wall Street community in Tulsa abuts downtown. It's about a 35 square block area historically. Wow, and it was desired by industrial interests and railroad interests. So there is some evidence that there was an effort afoot to remove the black population, push them further north. That's why some people, when they look at these events, they see not so much a riot, not so much a massacre, but a pogrom, an intentional removal of a population from their homelands based on surreptitious grounds. And so repairing the economic
Kelly, do you
hold
1 second? Yeah. 1 second. Go ahead and finish. Go ahead and finish.
I was saying repairing the economic damage that happened 100 years ago is, I would say, well nigh impossible. But there are some things that we can do in the way of infrastructure location, incentives from business leadership like the Tulsa Chamber to put us in a better position.
Kelly, real quick, do you have a question?
Sure. Your comment regarding the youth wanting to leave these small towns because of lack of infrastructure and opportunity, have any of those towns actually, understood that predicament and are working to reconcile that issue? If so, what is happening in those towns? And if not, what do they need in order for that to happen?
They are struggling. These are very small towns by and large, a few hundred people. So because they have lost, for example, schools in these communities, and schools are kind of the community rallying point in a lot of communities across the United States, not just black communities. So the loss of those schools, the loss of population, the lack of infrastructure, these are really, really high hurdles to get over. What the towns have done that makes a lot of sense to me is collaborating as a collective of Oklahoma all-black towns and seeing what kind of economic energy and synergy they can create, particularly, again, leveraging cultural or heritage tourism.
All right, then. Well, first of all, sir, I am out of time. I certainly appreciate it. Hannibal Johnson, chair of the Education Committee for the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre Centennial Commission. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
You want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. See that name right there? Roland Martin Unfiltered. Like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications so when we go live, you'll know it.